I'm about to yap about The Rookie for over 2 hours straight. I'm putting all of my best videos together, so then all you have to do is sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy some Rookie videos. The Rookie is a show that has many different types of episodes. Sometimes they're silly, sometimes they're sad, and sometimes they are straight up dark. And in this video, we're going over the top 5 darkest episodes in The Rookie. Starting off our list with our number 5 spot, we have Season 7, Episode 4, Darkness Falling. The episode that introduced the notorious serial killer, Liam Glasser. The majority of this episode is as normal, dealing with one-off criminals including Harrison Novak, a serial killer who would bury his victims' bodies to prevent anybody from finding them. However, after being caught, he agreed to show the LAPD where his victims were buried. That's where the twist is introduced. A couple of canines smell something from further into the field, and they find even more bodies. The twist, though, was that even Harrison was surprised by the bodies that they found. He actually didn't kill any of the people they found. This caused a massive investigation where they had to find the mysterious second serial killer. This investigation led them to Westview Psychiatric Hospital, where they were there to get files on their patients. However, while they were there, they saw a green tarp hanging from an abandoned looking building and decided to look inside. This is where the true darkness began. While searching, they hear screaming and find a victim. Lopez takes care of getting the victim out while Nyla continues going. While down there, she enters a torture chamber and is searching around it until she sees needles and is stabbed shortly after with a paralysis drug. She would have died down there if Nyla didn't scare him off and Lopez didn't find her. Thinking about what this leads to with Liam Glasser in future episodes is what lands this episode on the number 5 spot. But at number 4, we have Season 4, Episode 17, Coding. An episode that deals with a very cold and dark scenario that could have killed hundreds of people. The episode starts with a death right off the bat, with a woman dying from a single vehicle accident where she was impaled. This woman was an organ donor though, which means that a child who has been on the list for a very long time is able to get a new heart. She's about to get ready for the surgery until the hospital systems are hacked. They were hacked by a man who says that his wife must get the heart or he will shut down every system and let everyone die. This is one of the largest and grandest stakes in the history of the show. This goes on for a couple of hours, where more systems begin to fail and people start to go into critical condition, including a couple of people who begin to die. The stakes are at their highest. Eventually, with a bit of persuasion from the child, the wife decides that she can't go through with the surgery and take the life of a child and wants to wait for the next heart, shutting down the operation, or that's what the man thought. When he gave up and tried to shut down the program, the group of hackers he was working with took over and held the hospital hostage for ransom instead, prolonging the lack of care for hundreds in the hospital even longer. Luckily, Jonah coughs up who's working with him out of guilt, and they managed to get the ransomware taken down. What's even crazier is that during all of this, there was also a kidnapping case that was found in the midst of the hospital chaos, rounding out one of the darkest episodes to date. Moving on to number 3, we have Season 1, Episode 16, Green Light. The episode that gives the audience a long and very unexpected death of a beloved character. This episode starts relatively normal, with all of the rookies going on their normal patrolling when Nolan and Bishop take a call about a valet destroying a lady's car. After the valet insults her, the lady attempts to stab the valet, and Nolan makes quick action. But in the meantime, her dress rips, and she decides to escalate the situation. What Nolan and Bishop didn't know is by escalating the situation, she means get her baby daddy to green light Nolan, sending the entire Southern Front to kill him. The LAPD begins to go after Cole Midas, the son of the leader of the Southern Front. They decide to put a big enough hole on the Southern Front's operation to get them to back down from the green light. However, before they can manage this, Cole captures Nolan as well as Captain Anderson, a beloved character in the show as well as in the fandom too. The scene between them and Cole lasted a long 5 minutes of the episode alone. And in this scene, he kicks Anderson into the pool where she begins to drown. Nolan fights Cole to save her, but while running away, Cole shoots Anderson, and she's killed in cold blood. Luckily, the episode ends in Cole Midas being arrested by Nolan and the rest of the LAPD, but just because justice was served, that doesn't mean that this episode is any less gruesome, landing it a podium spot on this list. Now we're going to talk about the number 2 episode, which is season 5, episode 22, Under Siege. The episode that involves 2 near deaths of main characters, and this starts within the first minute of the episode. The episode begins with Aaron and Selena getting back home from hanging out, but decide to detour after hearing some strange noises in the alleyway. As they explore, they're confronted by a small group of masked men. These men shoot Aaron and knock Selena out, but before Selena's knocked out, they tell her a message.
Remember this. Covered face. Shroud of shame. No escape when you're to blame. Cry me a river. Back to the start. Dog, deliver alive part.
The 2 of them are rushed to the hospital, where Aaron is taken to emergency surgery where he remains for nearly the rest of the episode. Throughout the runtime, the show periodically goes back to show the surgery and the polarizing success of it. Meanwhile, Selena and the rest of the police department are left to figure out who did this. While at home for the night, the men go to Nolan's home, as well as Nyla's home, and this causes hell to break loose. Turns out there's dozens of these men who ambush Tim and Lucy while the rest of the LAPD come in to back them up. They find out that it's a group of ex-cons who were used as pawns to distract the LAPD, while a different group goes after a different target that will cause larger damage. This episode ends with no full resolution, and it's not even confirmed that Aaron is okay, as near the end of the episode, Aaron goes into code blue and is surrounded by doctors. What made this even worse was that this was the season finale, and people were left with the dark thought for close to a year that Aaron could be dead and didn't make it out, which is why this episode is at my number 2 spot. But before we head to the number 1 darkest episode of the show, I want to briefly talk about a few honorable mentions that either aren't as dark but are still noteworthy, or they have a very dark portion of an overall not so dark episode. Season 7, episode 8, Wildfire. This was the episode where Liam Glasser burnt down that forest and caused Tim and Lucy to get stuck in the fire, where they could have almost died if it wasn't for the fire shelter that they had. People were evacuated from their home. Liam's family was torn apart by his wife and son figuring out his lies, and the audience was able to see how Liam kills his victims by finding a victim in the house tied up in the shower covered in needles. Season 5, episode 4, The Choice. This was when Rosalind Dyer decided to exact her last kill, and it was between 2 people, Bailey Noom or herself. Her gruesome plan was to trap Bailey in this contraption that would drown her and get her electrocuted to death, or she would force Nolan, Bailey's partner, to shoot her instead to save his wife, as a way to make a massive exit. While this doesn't work, it's really hard to watch the combination of Bailey slowly meeting her potential death, as well as Nolan having to be tortured with the thought of her death. Season 4, episode 1, Life and Death. It is a pretty dark premise overall, but the extremely dark part of this episode is one specific scene. The scene where Lopez is shown to her room at LaFiera's home. After Lopez pushes back on LaFiera's demands, she hits Lopez with what is, in my opinion, the darkest line in the show.
But if you resist, Dr. Morales will put you into a twilight sleep and you will spend the next 3 months as an incubator. Not even conscious when your baby comes. And your life ends.
Season 2, episode 10, The Dark Side. This episode is where we are introduced to Caleb Wright, and although the first 90% of this episode is pretty normal, once Lucy goes out with Caleb, he drugs Lucy and kidnaps her, then takes her away. The reason why this episode is counted as an honorable mention is because it directly segues into our number 1 darkest episode in the Rookie history. At number 1, we have Season 2, Episode 11, Day of Death, the most gruesome episode to take place in the show. And in this episode, the audience is subjected to the following: the possibility of a main character dying, the roller coaster of emotions from the rest of the cast trying to find her, and experiencing the hope slowly draining from Lucy throughout the episode. It continues off from where Caleb kidnapped Lucy. She is taken to a house in the middle of nowhere, where Caleb tattoos the date on her thigh, signifying the day that she was going to die. We find out that Rosalind is involved in Caleb's killings, and when Lucy attempts and fails to escape, Caleb buries her in a barrel outside instead, where she would never be found. Slowly, she's losing oxygen, losing sanity, and losing hope. With no way to save herself, she accepts her eventual death, singing to herself.
Stars shining bright above you. I breathe the same to whisper, I love you.
But Caleb is uncovered, and the LAPD find and shoot him. The problem with this? He didn't tell them where she was buried. This is where we were convinced that she was going to die, and we just had to watch it happen. But a miracle happened. Tim spots the ring that Lucy threw outside when she was jumping into the barrel, and he finds her. We end this episode with her in Tim's arms, barely conscious and needing to be rushed to the hospital. While there, we're left with her having to unpack what happened to her, and we end with Nolan talking to Rosalind, telling her that her secrets have been unsealed and that she has no more power. However, she says that she has one more, one that we don't find out until much later. There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of death in The Rookie. Even some of the most notorious and loved characters have died in some of the most gruesome ways. But what about the times that characters almost died but survived despite the odds? Today, we're gonna go over every time that the Rookie characters almost died. Let's start with one of the most well-known instances of a main character almost dying, which is in Season 2, Episode 11, Day of Death. I think we all know what I'm talking about, but for those who don't know or need a refresher, this is the episode after Lucy was kidnapped by Caleb Wright. The episode started with nobody knowing where Lucy was, and she had been missing for upwards of 13 hours by this point. And given the 24-hour window that it takes for one of his victims to die, it means that the LAPD was running out of time quickly. Lucy is not a quitter though, and she definitely wasn't one during this episode. When she was tied on the chair and was close to getting put in that barrel inside the house, she broke the chair and started to make a run for it. Unfortunately, she failed, which is when Caleb decided to upgrade his crazy plan. By burying her in the barrel underground, Lucy had even less oxygen to work with while waiting for the LAPD to save her. She sat there quietly, singing to herself to keep her sane while the oxygen level got lower and lower. It seems like it was over for her until Tim saw the ring that she dropped outside of where she was buried, and she was saved. This definitely is one of, if not the most famous example of a character almost dying in the show. And it did an amazing job at telling the audience that they weren't going to hold back with what they had planned, even if it was going to emotionally torture us. This next example of a main character almost dying happened over 3 seasons later and is personally my favorite on the list. Season 5, Episode 22, Under Siege, is the episode in which Selena Juarez and Aaron Thorson were brutally attacked by the crew of masked men in the alley. While Selena was badly injured during the situation, she wasn't the one on death's doorstep. It was Aaron. He was wheeled into the hospital with Bailey, to the horror of Lopez and Wesley. Nolan, with the help of Selena, tries to decipher the cryptic message that one of the masked men told her while she was taken out. And while they're confused at first, they get to work finding out what it means. Meanwhile, the rest of the LAPD made it their highest priority to catch the guys who put Aaron in this condition. Slowly but surely, the pieces come together for both the message as well as who is behind the attempted killing. During all of this, the operations are not going well. The doctors are panicking, and his vitals are dropping. That night, the killers come back, but for Nolan and Bailey this time, as well as Nyla and James right after. Luckily, they were unsuccessful on both fronts, and this is what led to finding where the mask came from. A one-act play that sold their assets over the years until they landed in the hands of Roy Greco, as well as his crew of past convicts. The LAPD take out the crew of grunts, but they miss the real villain behind it all, who is revealed at the end of the episode. But what's also revealed at the end is Aaron being wheeled into emergency surgery, and this was the cliffhanger that the season ended on. Luckily, he heals up by the middle of the first episode of season 6, but when season 5 ended, nobody knew if Aaron was going to be okay. For months, the audience was scared that Aaron was actually going to die, and this is what makes this instance one of my favorites. Next up, we have to go to the beginning of season 5, all the way back in episode 4, The Choice. And this instance is none other than Bailey Noon being trapped in the chamber of death created by Rosalind Dyer. This episode, like the last one, jumps right into the thick of it, as not even 3 minutes into this episode, Bailey falls into the chamber and is stuck without any help until the LAPD arrive. At first, Nolan and everyone else were just gonna bust through the grate and get her out, but then she shows them that there are actually a whole bunch of other booby traps laid around the chamber. That's when the water begins to start rising, and Nolan gets the call from Rosalind, where he is sent on a wild goose chase to get to her. Meanwhile, as he has to ditch his things and drive away, the water level just continues to rise. The LAPD realizes that unless someone got her out of there, she was going to be electrocuted by the grate. Nolan finally gets to Rosalind, and a live feed is waiting there for him. Rosalind gives Nolan an option: either take the gun she hands him and shoot her in order to save Bailey, or he does nothing and she will slowly die in front of his eyes. The water level is at dangerous levels by this point, and they need to get her out fast. The LAPD find the generator, and the plan is set. And as Tim says,
she's cold, she's exhausted, everything has to go perfectly in order for us to save her.
Nolan decides not to shoot her and trust his gut, and the LAPD cut the generator. Bailey is then forced to go under the water while the booby traps are going off on the surface. If she goes up to the surface, she dies, but if she stays underwater too long, she also dies. Eventually, she goes limp. Luckily, they cut the grate just in time, and Selena jumps in to go get her. Some CPR later, and Bailey is resuscitated. She was likely seconds away from death in there, and without everybody's help, she would have been as good as dead. Moving on to our next episode, we have to go back to Season 3, Episode 5, Lockdown. And for this one, we're going to talk about the time that Jackson West almost died while on patrol with Doug Stanton. I know that Jackson ends up dying later in the series, but this is an example of when he almost died much sooner. Unlike the other episodes from earlier in this list, this episode doesn't actually center around the near-death experience. Instead, it's at the end of the episode, so we're just going to focus on that. In the final quarter of the episode, Doug and Jackson are responding to a call that comes from Manor Apartments, one of the most dangerous spots in all of Los Angeles. And when they get there, Jackson runs into the suspects they were after. They slowly were approaching him until one of them jumps from behind his back and takes Jackson down. They proceeded to beat him, kick him, and make him bleed until he wasn't moving. And while all of this was happening, Doug was just watching it happen. He didn't call for backup. He didn't go in to save his partner. No, he just sat and watched, and then slowly backed up so that he didn't have to keep witnessing it. I plan on making a whole video about the Doug Stanton plotline in the future, so make sure to leave a like if you want me to make it happen. Anyways, Jackson is wheeled away in critical condition, and while he ends up being okay in the hospital by the end of the episode, it was clear that just a little longer of a beating could have easily killed him, and that's why this is on the list. With this next one, we have to time travel all the way back to Season 1 with the pilot episode of the show. We're going to talk about the first ever near-death experience that was shown on The Rookie, and that was with Tim Bradford during the shooting in the alley. Once again, this episode doesn't just focus on Tim's near-death experience, considering it is the pilot. So we're going to just jump forward to when it actually happened. About 32 minutes into the episode, the suspect matching the bolo that the LAPD got earlier has been spotted, and Tim and Lucy respond to it. They decide to call him back up, and that's when Nolan, Bishop, Lopez, and Jackson are starting to head that way. But they don't get there until after the shootout begins. And shortly after said shootout started, Tim was shot in the chest right through the window. This forces Lucy to give up on shooting them to go and save Tim. Tim is bleeding out at this point and is in critical condition, but he still tells Lucy to keep shooting back instead of trying to patch him up. That's when everyone else shows up, and Nolan and Bishop are able to safely apprehend Selby. We don't see Tim again until the next episode since he needed to heal, but it's insane that in the pilot episode, the show already made the audience think that one of the officers was going to die. Also, unlike the rest of these instances though, this actually is not the only near-death experience that Tim faced though, and it's actually technically not even the only one in the first season. Let's jump ahead to Season 1, Episode 20, Freefall, as this involves the virus situation that the LAPD had to contain, especially Tim and Lucy, since Tim was locked inside the room with the man who was dying of the disease. It was unknown if he was going to make it before the experimental vaccine was going to get to him, since he didn't have any symptoms and it really hadn't been that long since the man that was infected had died. Luckily, the vaccine did make it in time and he was able to get it administered, but the virus isn't actually the only near-death experience that he faced within this situation. It was the vaccine itself as well. as at the very end of this episode, Tim collapses on the ground with everyone around him. Going into the first episode of season 2, he's having a severe reaction to the vaccine that puts him into anaphylactic shock, and it looked like it was going to get worse until the shooting in the front of the hospital started and distracted everybody. It was unknown how Tim was doing until he busted out of the ambulance and is shown to be just fine. Now let's move on to a more recent example that happened in the middle of season 7, with season 7 episodes 8 and 9, Wildfire and The Kiss. I lump both episodes in here as the actual near-death experience happened at the end of Wildfire, and then it continues into The Kiss. The victim of this near-death experience was James Murray. At the end of Wildfire, while taking care of some boxes at the end of the evacuation, a drive-by shooter comes by and shoots Kylie and James. And when Selena finds them, they are both in severely critical condition. When Nyla is told about the shooting, she is left speechless. Then Tim and Lucy see James get rolled into the hospital. He is sent straight to operation, very similar to Aaron Thorson's case. Due to Nolan knowing about the situation involving James and Kylie's kiss, however, Nyla is immediately made a suspect, and the majority of the episode is spent trying to clear her name. But while doing so, they find a lot of things, including a picture with Leonard Kelsey, an anti-police extremist. This ended up causing issues, as now the LAPD knows that James knowingly invited a prominent fugitive into his home underneath Nyla's nose. Luckily, they find out who the assailant was, and Nolan, Tim, and Lucy are able to apprehend him. Also, luckily, James is able to get out of the operation while being relatively okay. Obviously, he's still in crappy condition and continued to be for the next few episodes, but given that he was shot multiple times in the chest and was rushed into the ER Aaron Thorson style, it was a miracle that he survived. Next up, I'm going to talk about the season 3 finale and first episode of season 4, since I feel like I have to talk about this instance, even if the character wasn't physically about to die. We're talking about Angela Lopez getting smuggled to Guatemala by La Fiera to be used as a surrogate to her own child, while La Fiera would then take Angela's child and raise the child as her own, all while killing Angela after she gives birth. She has no way out of this situation on her own, and when she tries to give La Fiera some pushback, she drops the killer line.
But if you resist, Dr. Morales will put you into a twilight sleep and you will spend the next 3 months as an incubator. And your life ends.
She knew that she was good as dead unless something happened. And that's when Wesley and the LAPD headed to Guatemala to help rescue her from La Fiera's grasp. It was a close call though, as in order to be saved, Angela had to go through forced labor to get everyone out of the house, as well as was getting continuously chased by La Fiera and her men. Without Wesley or the LAPD showing up to be able to get her out of there, she would have 100% died, and we would have never seen Angela Lopez again. Those are all of the notable times where characters almost died in The Rookie. The Rookie is a show that has some of the craziest storylines in television, but not all of these storylines were completely made up. There are a few episodes in the show's history that are based on true events, or at least loosely connected to them. And today, we're going to talk about every instance where The Rookie took inspiration from a real-life event. Before I jump into specific episodes though, I think it would be a disservice if I didn't talk about the entire show's premise being connected to real-life events. The backstory of the main character, John Nolan, is based off a real-life person named William Norcross, who dropped his career within his family's printing business while in his mid-40s to pursue becoming a police officer for the LAPD. He had decided to leave small-town Pennsylvania to move all the way to Southern California to make this happen, just like John Nolan did. This all took place a couple of years before the pilot of The Rookie was recorded. And while a couple of the details are different, such as John Nolan being in construction instead of printing, it's still very clear that the character was based off William Norcross's life. Interestingly, Norcross works for the show as a consultant in order to make sure everything in the show is up to procedure and as accurate as they can be. However, he still is with the LAPD full-time and was actually promoted to sergeant back in 2023. So does that mean Nolan will eventually become a sergeant? I guess we'll just have to see. I also want to talk about another character's backstory, as it also is based off of real-life events, and I think this one is even more interesting. The backstory of Aaron Thorson is completely based off a real-life case that happened back in 2007, and the parallels are clear as day. The real-life event that correlates with his story is the case of Amanda Knox, a woman who had called the police after coming back to her apartment that she shared with a roommate named Meredith Kircher, who was found dead on the floor of the apartment's locked bathroom. Amanda was promptly arrested along with her boyfriend and her employer, and she was sentenced to 26 years in prison for the murder. This trial made international headlines, and they portrayed Amanda Knox in a horrible light, and her reputation was ruined. She kept appealing, and eventually she was exonerated of the crime. But unfortunately, her reputation was already tarnished, and she still talks about the situation to this day. Aaron Thorson's case is very similar to this, finding his friend dead in their home, getting charged with the murder, and then getting exonerated after all of the mistrials. But there are a few key differences to point out. Number one, which is the obvious one, Knox and Kircher were women, whereas Aaron and Patrick were men. Number two, Knox became famous because of this incident, while Aaron was already famous beforehand. And number three, Knox didn't end up joining the police because of what happened, whereas Aaron did. And while these are some pretty key differences, the more important parts are exactly the same. Having their lives ruined by a heinous accusation, as well as having highly publicized cases that had a massive role in shaping the public's opinion about both of them. Now that we got both of those character backstories out of the way, I can start talking about episodes that have events that are based on real life. The first episode I want to talk about is the most recent one in Season 7, Episode 16, The Return. And we're talking about the Tulsa and Amy situation where they drove their car into the water while live streaming to thousands of fans. The reason I'm talking about this is because this plotline takes clear inspiration from the Jack Doherty situation that happened where he was driving his $200,000 McLaren while live streaming, and he was reading his chat and checking his phone while he was driving, just like Tulsa and Amy were doing. This resulted in him crashing it while still live streaming, just like Tulsa and Amy. And while this part of it is similar, they decided to take a different approach with the aftermath. While Jack Doherty was scrutinized and raked over the coals by everyone online, including his own subscribers, Tulsa and Amy were arrested, and all of their fans came to their support instead of being against them. Eventually, the fans do end up turning on Tulsa, but not because of this situation, but rather because Amy threw him under the bus to jumpstart her own brand. Our next event happened a few episodes before this, back in Season 7, Episode 10, Chaos Agent. What we're about to talk about is something I didn't even know about until a few lovely users on Reddit named HouseFirm3552 and Lobster Puppy told me about this situation. This episode is the whole episode circling around Zuzu and the three girls who were in the woods. In this episode, the original story is that the three girls were attacked by a large masked man who wanted to kill them, and that Grace was not going to make it. But that's only what Ava and Charlotte hoped would happen, because in reality, the other two girls were responsible for trying to murder Grace. Their stories were almost exactly identical word for word, and the police started to get suspicious. After searching the girls' technology, they discovered that Ava and Charlotte were talking about the Grace murder for quite a bit of time, especially with a demon named Zuzu. Zuzu ended up just being an AI, but it was enough to trick the girls. Now you may be wondering, what could this possibly be related to in real life? Let's jump back to May 31st, 2014, where two 12-year-old girls named Anissa Wire and Morgan Geyser lured their friend named Peyton Lutner into the woods near a local park around them. They then proceeded to stab her 19 times in order to prove that Slenderman was real. Then they left her for dead. Luckily, Peyton ended up surviving the attack and she was found by a cyclist nearby. What's even scarier about this story is that according to Wikipedia, the two girls showed no remorse for doing what they did, similarly to Ava and Charlotte, saying that the attack was a necessity. Once again, thanks to those Reddit users for bringing this to my attention. Next up, we're gonna head back in time a little bit more to Season 7, Episode 8, Wildfire. And while this one is technically based off real life events, it's not based on the exact event that this ended up being connected to by the fanbase. There isn't an exact wildfire event or date that the episode is based off of, but this entire episode goes over the typical evacuation procedure that Los Angeles has when there's a wildfire in the area. This isn't exactly an uncommon occurrence, so it was only a matter of time before the Rookie made their own story involving a Los Angeles wildfire. I wouldn't have put this on the list if it was just about this, but the timing in which this episode came out made this episode worth mentioning, as the week that this episode released, there were active wildfires happening in Los Angeles. This obviously was not the show's intention, as the episode was scheduled for a specific date, and switching them around would not be possible, as it would completely screw up the timeline and the cohesiveness of the main story. The show decided to turn this unfortunate and coincidental timing into a good thing though, as this episode brought awareness to the wildfires happening in Los Angeles, and the show was able to get more attention headed towards charities who were helping people who were victims of the wildfires. Overall, I thought this was worth a mention, but let's get back to specific events now. Moving on to our next event, we need to head all the way back to Season 2, with Season 2, Episode 6, Fallout. This was the episode that involved the impending missile attack, as well as the alert that went out with it. This whole plot started while Nolan was in the courtroom, and everyone in there started receiving an alert on their phone that an impending missile attack was on its way to Los Angeles, which would kill the entire city. Panic ensues across the entire city, especially in the courtroom. And with Oscar there, he didn't exactly help with some of the comments he was making.
Panic. What if it's not fake? Well, then you got about 28 minutes until you find out what hell feels like.
Eventually, Nolan and Jessica are able to get everyone into the bomb shelter, even if the judge tried to keep them locked out at first. Later, it's revealed that this entire alert was a false alarm, and everyone's able to safely leave the courthouse. What makes this episode different compared to the other ones on this list is that Nolan actually references the real-life event within this episode, while all of the others do not. The year before this episode took place, on January 13th, 2018, a real-life missile alert was sent out to the entire state of Hawaii, causing not just the entire state of Hawaii to panic, but as well as the entire rest of the nation, as there was no way to evacuate everyone from an island state in such a short amount of time. Even the phrasing, "seek immediate shelter, this is not a drill," at the end of each alert is the exact same between the real-life event and the Rookie episode. A key difference, however, was that instead of the missile landing in 29 minutes, the real-life missile alert did not have a time attached to it, adding to the panic that happened in real life. The actual event lasted about 38 minutes, as the government then sent out another alert saying that the earlier one was a miscommunication that was made during a drill. Interestingly though, the Rookie did a good job highlighting one thing that was similar to the real-life event. Instead of immediately taking shelter like the alert said to, most people in real life, as well as the episode, began to call their loved ones instead, as people thought that this was more important than seeking shelter. And with that, those were all of the episodes of The Rookie that were based off real-life events. There are over 25 characters who have only been in one episode of The Rookie, and today we're going to talk about every single one of them and their stories, starting with Armando de Leon from Season 4, Episode 1, Life and Death, the gangster who was responsible for the murder of Officer Jackson West. In this episode, while trying to get Lopez back from La Fiera, the LAPD finds camera footage of Jackson getting shot in the back while trying to escape. At first, nobody knew who this assailant was, as they made a quick run for it. But after getting some DNA from Jackson's body, they found out that it was De Leon. Lieutenant Gray tracks him down, and while he tries to flee, he eventually surrenders. But he knew that Jackson wouldn't approve of this, and instead he arrested him. He then got charged for conspiracy and murder. Let's go back a season and talk about Katie Barnes from Season 3, Episode 11, New Blood, the ex-military who gave policing a try before she was ready. Barnes joined the LAPD right after leaving the Army and was assigned to Tim Bradford. From the beginning, it was clear that she was still stuck in military mode, as she would call suspects enemies and being hostile towards one of them off the rip. Bradford treated her differently and gave her a more hands-on and gentle approach. Lucy was unhappy with this until Tim explained himself and how he handles his rookies.
Why are you being so nice to her?
Officer Barnes won't wear perfume because she's still worried it'll give away her position. And part of her is still waging a war in Afghanistan. You are a kind and insightful person. You see the good in people.
Eventually, Barnes realizes that policing isn't for her at this point in her life, and she resigns on her first day of patrol. On to a more recent character, we have Harrison Novak from Season 7, Episode 4, Darkness Falling, a serial killer whose reign ended after a car accident gave him away. In the episode, there was a multiple car accident on the highway, and while trying to find any evidence of someone being under the influence, they find a woman in the back of one of the cars, and they note that the car is Harrison Novak's. They raided his house and found pictures of all of Novak's victims. He knew that he was in some deep water, so he called Wesley, his previous lawyer, but he didn't know that Wesley moved to being a district attorney, and so Lopez and Harper were able to listen in. After trying to go out with a bang by trying to kill a sorority, and failing, he was arrested and he confessed to where he buried all of his victims. However, while doing so, they find out about bodies of another serial killer who would end up being identified as Liam Glasser. Now we have Bill August from Season 4, Episode 20, Nervo, a corrupt CIA agent who was responsible for the entire operation. The uncovering of his operation was all because of a Russian CIA operative named Ilya Sakharov, who fled to the US after being arrested for treason. He was also responsible for the kidnapping of Kate Hill, who was able to unravel August's operation. Eventually, Simone and Nolan track him down and they apprehend him. Moving on to Troy Hoffman from Season 5, Episode 12, Death Notice, the fake doctor who was out for the blood of Oscar Hutchinson. After hearing about how Oscar was donating a kidney to his daughter, Hoffman saw a chance to get revenge for the stabbing of his brother. However, he didn't know that the LAPD was keeping close guard of Oscar, so he had to come up with another plan. He captured the doctor's husband and son and told Dr. Bernard that Oscar had to die during surgery or her family would. However, he didn't play his alias well enough, as Selena caught onto it and identified him as Troy Hoffman. With the help of Nolan, they detain him. Hoffman remained smug though, saying that Oscar had to die or they would kill her family, and going there to save them would be too late. He was wrong about that though, because the LAPD did save them and Hoffman was arrested. Do any of you remember Beth Veston from Season 5, Episode 1, Double Down? She was the attorney of Rosalind Dyer, who was beaming from future prospects that she would get from representing her. But that was just a facade, as she actually was there to help Rosalind escape by pretending to be her and diverting the police, as Rosalind was wearing a blonde wig and got away in the opposite direction. While being interviewed, it's clear that she was too far gone, as she was cutting her arms on the table, and when they went over to check on her, they saw Rosalind's name in her arm. She tells them that people are going to die, and she was right, as we find out that Veston did this in exchange for Rosalind to kill her parents, and Rosalind does this. Veston is then arrested for her crimes afterwards. One of the wildest one-time character stories comes from Corey Harris from Season 3, Episode 7, True Crime. He was a former child actor who formed a religious group that starts with a C, calling himself Jedediah the Prophet, and he used young and impressionable students from his acting classes as his followers. While live streaming, someone breaks into his house, and while Corey tries to get away and hide while calling the police, the intruder does find him and kills him. What's crazy is the LAPD ended up finding pieces of Harris around the house, as the killer spread them around. And the eeriest part of all this, the live stream was still on, for all of his followers to watch. But let's talk about his ex-fiancée, Charlotte Luster, from the same episode. She was the co-star and childhood sweetheart of Corey Harris's character on Paul's Place, and they stayed in each other's lives for years after, dating and getting engaged in real life. About halfway through the episode though, she is suspected of the murder of Corey Harris, as they couldn't locate her after his death. However, it's later theorized that she was actually the one who was killed by Corey or his mother. Unfortunately, no evidence ever came up for this, and her death remains a mystery. Now we're headed to the present day, and we met a character recently that was long overdue, Ruth Harper, Nyla's mom from Season 7, Episode 17, Mutiny and the Bounty. We are finally introduced to her after she calls Nyla for help during a supposed burglary, but it actually was just her getting an eviction notice. Angela and Nyla dig around and find out that Ruth was a target of fraud, and they, along with Lopez's mom, work together to get the fraudster put behind bars. They catch the fraudster Priscilla in the act after Lopez's mom acts like another target. And at the end of the episode, we see Ruth going through a family album with Nyla, apologizing to her for being gullible, but Nyla assures her that it's just her seeing the best in people. Next, we're talking about Livy from Season 7, Episode 12, April Fools, the social media manager who sent the entire city into the purge. In the beginning of the episode, we find out about her because of the April Fool's jokes she was making on the LAPD's social media pages. These jokes were causing civilian confusion, and so Tim fired her and told her to leave. She decides to get back at them by posting that all crime is legal for 3 hours, and LA has its own purge. Property was destroyed, people were killed, and so much more. Eventually, after Livy calls the police for help, they save her, and then they arrest her for what she did. My favorite moment from her episode was this.
I really didn't think that anyone was going to take this seriously. I'm so sorry.
Let's jump to the next episode and talk about two people from the same episode. AJ Knox and Sean Larson from season 7 episode 13, 3 Billboards. AJ is a football star who used to play with Officer Penn in college, and Larson is AJ's friend and assistant. We meet AJ as he passes by the crime scene Miles is at, and they catch up. Then AJ offers Miles to come to his party that night, and he agrees. At the party, Sean Larson is stealing his jewelry, and we find out that AJ knows but doesn't care. But then something happened that would make him care. The next morning, they're all just hanging out and Sean offers smoothies to everyone. And while Penn declines, AJ and his bouncer accept. These smoothies were poisoned though, and we find out that Larson is an insider in the robbery of AJ's house. Penn saves AJ, and with the help of Lucy and Selena, they take down all the robbers and apprehend Sean Larson. At the end, Penn is offered $300,000 a year to be private security for AJ, and he respectfully declines. But Penn does score some season tickets from AJ for Tim, so that's nice. Let's take a trip back a few seasons before to talk about Claire Ivy from season 4 episode 2, 5 Minutes, the serial robber who has avoided getting arrested for years. While on patrol together, Lucy and Nolan meet her after pulling her over and finding out that she's a person of interest. This is because of many heists that they could never get her connected to. They let her on her way, but tell her that she's under supervision, so she should leave town. She tells them that she knows this song and dance and tells them she has a plan and they'll never figure it out. And then she leaves. Nolan tried to keep tabs on her and stop her, but all of these efforts failed and she got away. Her plan was to steal a bunch of jewelry from one of the trucks for the gala, and while she made her move, the LAPD managed to stop her. She tried to escape, but she was arrested and was hauled off to not be seen again. Now we're going to talk about Richard Dormer from season 5 episode 8, The Collar. The man behind the collars that would blow up after a slow 43 minutes. He broke into his sister's coworker's house and held her at gunpoint. Then he made her put on a collar and forced her to drive around while recording herself. Unfortunately, the LAPD couldn't save her in time, but they did find out about another one of Richard's victims, another company worker named Creighton Mitchell, who heard about the death and was terrified. Luckily, he got out of the car and removed the collar with shears, and that's when they found out about the timer. Lastly, they find the CEO with a collar on too, but Nolan and Selena go to save him. This is where Selena asks which wire to cut and Richard says blue. However, she knew that he was lying and told Nolan to cut the red one. This works, and Richard's plan fails. He is then taken into custody. These next two are a blast from the past, starting with Cecilia Olivo from season 1 episode 9, Standoff, the girlfriend of Marcus Vance. We are introduced to her while they're trying to take down Marcus, as they search her apartment and try to find him. They don't find him there, and Cecilia reveals that she is his girlfriend, but she didn't find out about his criminal activity until she got pregnant. That's when the shootouts begin, and the stress from them causes her water to break, and she starts going into labor with the help from Lucy. The baby is born during the shootout, but Vance breaks in wanting to take the baby. Luckily, Nolan and a team come save them and Vance is arrested. Cecilia is checked over and she goes on with her life as normal with her brand new baby. The other early bird is Alex Montgomery from season 1 episode 8, Time of Death, Nolan's first kill. While on patrol, Nolan and Bishop find 2 robbers in a gas station, one being Alex. He makes a run for it and Nolan follows him. Eventually, Alex runs into a random house and has a family put at gunpoint. He then runs upstairs, and before he can make an escape, Alex gets caught. Nolan warns him to drop the gun, but Alex whips around with the gun in his hand still pointed at Nolan. As soon as Nolan sees this, he has a gut reaction and shoots Alex, where he dies on the scene. This sends Nolan into a spiral, leading to the investigation that temporarily paused his career. Up next on our list, we got Tom Bradford from season 4, episode 9, Breakdown, the abusive father of Tim Bradford. Technically, he was mentioned in the episode before, where Jennifer, Lucy, and Tim talked about Tom and his past with Tim. It's revealed that Tom is in hospice, slowly dying. While Jennifer forgave him, Tim did not. But in the next episode, we actually see him when Tim pays a visit to him due to an old case involving a family friend. Monica Okoa, whose husband was murdered. Tim confronts Tom with this, and Tom reveals that he murdered Frank and staged it, since Tom and Monica were having an affair, and he helped Monica cover up the loose ends. Tim arrested Monica and then came back. Instead of arresting him, he gives Tom a piece of his mind and then leaves him to die a slow and painful death. A few episodes later, we meet Jane Becker from season 4, episode 15, Hit List. She starts out working with another assassin to take out jurors who were on the Kellen Meyer case. We'll get back to him later though. But while on the job, she runs into Lieutenant Gray at a parking garage. She tries to distract him at first, but he sees her weapon. She then tries to kill him, and while she did seriously injure him, she couldn't get the job done, as he was able to retaliate and she was shot in the chest. And while paramedics do come for both of them and they were taken to the hospital, she ended up passing away. This next name might make some of you shiver. Cole Midas from season 1, episode 16, Greenlight, the son of a major gang leader who ended the life of Captain Anderson. He was introduced as the son of Leonard Midas, leader of the Southern Front, but also the baby daddy of a woman that Nolan arrested earlier and accidentally ripped her dress. He was infuriated with this and put a green light on him. After a while Nolan and Anderson were on a call, Cole ambushed them and tied them to chairs next to a swimming pool. After some back and forth, Cole pushes Anderson in, and while she escapes this, Cole shoots her while escaping himself, and this shot ends up killing her. He knew he was cooked after this, so he tried to flee the city, but his dad gave up his location and he was promptly arrested by Nolan, with guns pointed all around him. He was then later charged for kidnapping and the murder of Captain Zoe Anderson. Moving on from Cole, we get to Jerry McGrady from season 4, episode 6, Poetic Justice, an older cop who just wasn't ready to retire. Gray wanted McGrady to retire, and he appointed Tim to make it happen. So Tim asks McGrady if he wants to come along for a ride along. Initially, Tim just wanted to use this as a way to convince him to retire, but then a case came up and McGrady had a connection to it because of a friend who died long ago. They find the gold and stop a criminal who was trying to get it. After this case, McGrady decides that this is a great way to end his career, and he retired on his own after almost 44 years of service. Now we're heading to one of the documentary episodes with Lisa Miller from season 5, episode 18, Double Trouble, the best friend of Sava and the affair partner of Jake. In the beginning of the episode, when Jake is released from prison, Sava and Lisa are there to greet him. But later on, Jake is found dead in a dumpster. After a bit of digging, the LAPD find out that Jake and Lisa were having an affair, and Lisa wanted Jake all to himself. For some reason, I don't know what she saw in him, but that's besides the point. But Lisa couldn't handle that Jake was with Sava, and so she tried to run both of them off the road. She failed at this though, so she ends up killing Jake by just shooting him in the head instead. When Lisa was confronted by the LAPD, she shot Nolan, but because of his vest, he ended up being okay. Lisa was then arrested for the murder of Jake and the attempted murder of Nolan. Next up, we got Mrs. Mitchelson from season 5, episode 7, Crossfire, the woman who had a lot to hide from the LAPD. She was introduced when Nolan and Selena told her about the death of Alvin, her husband. They found out that Alvin was a con artist who caused a lot of deaths, and he would have ended up in prison very soon if it wasn't for the people going for the kill before that. After some more work, the LAPD found out that Alvin was actually poisoned, and that's what caused his death. After interviewing Mrs. Mitchelson, she came clean about doing it because him going to prison wasn't going to give her his life insurance. She then was apprehended and we haven't seen her again. Let's circle back to Kellen Myers from season 4, episode 15, Hit List, the corrupt court officer who sold the list of jurors. The LAPD figured out about Myers after a raid, and he was brought in and interrogated by Lopez. He initially denied that he was ever involved, and he was going to plead the fifth. But Lopez tells him that she knows about the list that he provided, and that they saw that he was paid off by Rubio after looking through his finances. After all of this, he did confess, but he also assured them that he had no idea that people were going to die. He thought it was just going to be used to scare people off. Myers was then arrested for accessory to the murders. Let's head to the finale of season 4 with Gabrielle Navarre. In season 4, episode 22, Day in the Hole, the officer from the border. After Nolan was transferred to the Frontera Police Department for a week, he meets Gabrielle, who really needed help since the chief was absent. We don't see much of her until near the end of the episode when everyone is battling the group of criminals that come in. Afterwards, they arrested everyone, and Gabrielle thanked Nolan and the others for the help. Then Nolan went back to LA and never went back. And now to talk about the most recent one-time character, Rena David from Season 7, Episode 18, The Good, the Bad, and the Oscar. The woman that Penn went on a date with. Penn matches with her on a dating site and they meet at a restaurant. Things seem like they're going well until Penn notices the 7 on her necklace. He leaves the table to call Selena, where she finds out that she's associated with the Eastern Front, and he makes a run for it. The Eastern Front starts to go after him, and he pushes her out of the way while he makes his exit. While the gang keeps going after him, Rena doesn't, and we never get to see what happened to her after, but it's likely that she got arrested along with the rest of them. Since the pilot all the way back in 2018, we've seen the characters on The Rookie make some changes as the show evolved. But there are a few characters on the show that have completely changed since their first appearances. And today, I want to talk about 5 characters on The Rookie who have changed the most during the show's run. Starting off with a pretty obvious one, I'm going to talk about Tim Bradford, who over the span of 7 seasons has gone from one of the largest hardasses in the show to someone who started removing his shell and becoming a more emotionally intelligent person. Let's go back to the pilot to see exactly what I mean. In the pilot episode of the show, Tim was one of the most insufferable people on the roster. And before anyone comes after me for saying that, let me explain what I mean. In the pilot of the show, the writers make it very clear that we are supposed to be rooting for the rookies, which were John, Lucy, and Jackson. And with Tim being Lucy's TO, seeing him completely whip her around was a large contrast compared to how Lopez and Bishop handled Jackson and John. Not to mention that Tim was high-key racist in this episode.
Tell him that it's immigrants like them that make Americans like you look bad.
The writers end up trying to push this down later in the show and make the viewers forget that this ever happened. But I guess that was going to be a part of the initial vision for Tim, and then they switched it out once they were greenlit for the first season. But as the show continued to move forward, Tim had quite a few major changes that really shaped his character to not only be a better person, but a more dynamic character as a whole. The whole racism thing I mentioned earlier from the pilot ends up being challenged with the Doug Stanton plotline in Season 3, where he stands by Jackson every step of the way, as well as helps Lucy defend Jackson when Doug was directly coming after him. Tim seemed genuinely disgusted by Doug's actions and took Jackson's words about complacency to heart. Another massive change was how emotionally vulnerable he became compared to where he was. Of course, we still see him being walled up to some people today, such as Miles, but that makes sense considering he still has to keep up his tough guy persona for his rookies. But with people that he sees as friends, such as Lopez, John, Nyla, and especially Lucy, he is a lot more open emotionally. This can be directly credited to Lucy during their relationship, as he realized that being open wasn't so bad, and that led him to growing heavily as a person. Next up on our list, I want to talk about a character who was introduced later in Season 1 and went from being one of the most obnoxious and pretentious characters in the show to becoming an example of an amazing guy who would do anything for the people that he loves. Of course, I'm talking about Wesley Evers, who ever since his first major appearance in Season 1, Episode 10, has had the quickest change out of anyone else on the show. In this episode, and for the rest of the season afterwards, he was an extremely anti-police character who would fight back on almost anything he could, no matter how major or minor that it was. A large part of Wesley's character back then, as well as now, is that the justice system is broken and that something has to change. But back in Season 1, he did absolutely nothing to actually try and change anything since he felt this way. Instead, he took it out on the police officers around him who had zero power to change anything on a systemic level on their own either. And for some of these police officers, they know the system can be better and try to change it on an individual level. But sometimes this wasn't enough for Wesley. He even acted this way towards Lopez, his girlfriend who he was supposed to support in life. And all of this reminds me of another character that I'm going to bring up in a minute. But as the next few seasons progressed, we saw Wesley step back and realize that what he is doing is unproductive. He is just making his life and other people around him's lives harder. It's very clear that he loves Lopez. He would kiss the ground that she walks on. And so, while they don't always agree on the state of the system, Wesley has changed two different things. Number one, he keeps it out of his personal life. Him and Lopez can put their disagreements to the side and put their love for each other first, as this meant more to him than anything else in the grand scheme of things. Number two, he switched up his career to a position that he believed needed help more. Instead of being a public defender and trying to stop injustice, he became a district attorney in order to prevent the injustice from happening in the first place. I think that both of these things are admirable, unlike his best friend, James Murray, who was introduced in season 3 and kind of replaced Wesley in this regard. But unfortunately, instead, he only became worse for everyone around him. I've talked a lot about him in my character tier list video, so if you want to hear more about his character, you can watch it at the end of this one. Moving on to the next character who has changed the most. For this one, I'm going to be changing up the format a little bit. While this character's personality hasn't changed too heavily, their career has. I'm talking about Lucy Chen, someone who in the span of 7 seasons went from a brand new rookie with no experience whatsoever to becoming the newest sergeant of the Mid-Wilshire Division. Back when she was first introduced, she was seen as someone willing to learn and do what she needed to do. But at the same time, she had a way of pushing back against things she didn't like. One part of this was when she dated John in the first 4 episodes of the show. They had to do this behind the backs of everyone else in the LAPD because it could lead to trouble, and she knew this. While Bishop tried to tell her not to continue this, at first she didn't listen. Luckily, she does break out of this and that relationship, and I think that was the first major change in her character. The second part of her pushback was how she interacted with Tim. He is her training officer, and he demanded respect, but she was defiant with things that she didn't like, and she would make her voice heard. Funnily enough, she still does some of this now. However, as time went on, she locked in on her career, and this allowed her to rise the ranks and try out for other career paths much quicker than everyone around her. Literally weeks after becoming a P2 officer, she started work on becoming undercover. Then she wanted to be a detective. Both of these career paths didn't end up working out, but she stayed determined to find where in the LAPD she wanted to continue climbing up the ladder. And she does this through becoming sergeant. And as of the finale of season 7, she finally became one. It'll be interesting to see how her career continues to drastically change as the show continues. Now, let's get back to characters that have changed personality-wise. I've talked about this character a decent bit in terms of this, but I feel like if I don't talk about her, this video is incomplete. This part is about Selena Juarez, who went through all of the right changes in all of the right places. When she was first introduced in season 5, episode 3, Die Hard, we are introduced to a character who is eccentric, to say the least. She's really into horoscopes, spirituality, and auras, which on its own isn't a bad thing. But where it was bad was when she was using these auras and spirituality in her police work, which led to a plethora of instances where Selena had broken procedure, especially in this episode. From the illegal stop, to the illegal search of the vehicle, to saging the shop.
Was someone smoking weed in here?
I think that was me.
Excuse me?
Okay, that one isn't as bad, but you get my point. But this is the only character on this list that the viewers actively disliked when they were on screen. I agree, spiritual stuff and going Rambo on a solo mission as a rookie, she would have been canned if she was Lucy, Jackson, or Nolan. I really hate that character. She has absolutely no impulse control, doesn't follow direct orders, and solves cases with her mumbo-jumbo feelings, even yelled at Tim and Gray. If any of the original 3 were like that, they would have been out of the program in the first week. Not to mention, they made Nolan just a total pushover when it comes to her. I just hate her character. So irritating, almost never listens to orders. Like when Nolan interrogated the man from her childhood. Nolan clearly said more than one time that she could not talk to him or ask anything from him, and she straight up did the opposite. Annoying. But it's time to give her credit, because within the span of maybe 8 episodes total from season 5 episode 19 until the middle of season 6, she drastically becomes a better character. She stopped putting the aura stuff into her police work, started to not only listen to her superiors, but build upon their orders, as well as become more dynamic with her relationships involving other characters, like Aaron, Lucy, and even John himself. And now, in season 7, she's serving as a well-respected P2, who is a good role model for Miles, as she can walk him through her mistakes. I want to give an honorable mention to Lieutenant Gray for very similar reasons to Tim Bradford's growth. He was a massive hard ass in the beginning of the show, but as the show went on, he realized that he didn't have to be so hard on his team and that he could depend on them to do their jobs effectively. This allowed him to open up more to his team and learn to empathize with them, especially with John. The way that Gray went from having it out for John in season 1 to seeing him as one of the most respected officers now was heartwarming to watch evolve. But now, I want to talk about another character who went through an amazing metamorphosis since her first appearance in the beginning of season 2. Detective Nyla Harper is a character who couldn't trust anybody going into the Mid-Wilshire Division. She even met Nolan in the most untrustworthy way possible, jump scaring him with an undercover meetup at a bar, switching up on him, and immediately starting their relationship on a bad foot. And while this was unfair to Nolan, it's also understandable why she did it and why she's as on edge as she was during the second season. She had just come back from years of undercover work that not only drained her mentally and burned her out, but she also had her family torn apart because of it. She lost her husband and lost a majority of contact with her only daughter, and she was very apprehensive to tell anyone about her struggles. She didn't tell anyone how hard she was having it behind the scenes, and this made Nyla as hard as she was on everybody, but especially Nolan, since she was his TO. However, just like Lucy with Tim, Nolan had a positive effect on Nyla and allowed her to open up to everybody. Over the span of her time with Nolan, she learned to really respect him and saw him as a rock to lean on when she really needed it. This is especially apparent in season 7, episode 9, The Kiss. I think the end of this episode is one of the most heartwarming interactions between two characters in the entire show, let alone between these two.
If you need anything, do not hesitate.
John.
This isn't to mention the relationship she grew with everyone else as well. She became best friends with Lopez through their detective work and became each other's rocks. She got very close to Lieutenant Gray because of their mutual respect for one another, as well as her relationship with James, which, while I don't like them together and I think she deserves better, I have to respect that she loves him very much and can be vulnerable with him, even when he doesn't deserve to have that title. And with that, those are some of the characters on The Rookie that have changed the most from when they were first introduced. The Rookie is a show that has many amazing characters. John Nolan, Tim Bradford, Angela Lopez, Aaron Thorson, and so many more. But there's also some characters on the show that have not won the hearts of fans in the same way. And in this video, we're going to talk about every character on The Rookie that the audience doesn't like and explain why they're at the bottom of people's lists. I'm going to start with some of the more controversial ones and then go down the list to some of the most hated characters of all time. Starting off this video, we have Skip Tracer Randy, one of the most notorious side characters in the entire show. He's more of a recent addition than some of the others that we're going to talk about, but he's definitely made a lasting impression. His first appearances were strictly over the phone in Season 4, Episodes 10 and 11, Heartbeat, and Endgame, and his appearances didn't last that long either. Everyone thought he was pretty funny in those initial appearances, but it was after he started to physically appear that the divide started to show. His in-person appearances were criticized by fans of the show for being way too over the top, and some going as far as to say he's one of the most annoying characters on the entire show. Not everyone agrees with this, of course, as it's a pretty clean 50-50 split of Randy supporters and haters, but the haters can get really loud about him. There's even a whole post about wanting Randy to be killed off, and someone in the comments summarized what some of the people think pretty well. His kind of comedy, it's very cheap, and doesn't add to the show. It just makes it look stupid. So yes, I'd celebrate if I don't see him ever again on the show. It would be a gift for us all. Please do it. Next up, we need to talk about Bailey Noon. This is a character that is so hated by some people that there was a time where the Rookie-related forums had to ban posts about her because there were so many negative posts being made about her. Her first appearance was in the Season 3 finale, Threshold, and at first, people didn't seem to mind her, and even thought that she was going to be some sort of twist villain or something. But no, she became a Mary Sue type character, where she could do everything. And I say could because it's not for a lack of trying, since she's a firefighter, in the military, was a backup dancer for Aaron's dad, was a runner-up for the Nobel Peace Prize,
an Army reservist, a capoeira instructor, and a painter?
Motorcycle racer, mixologist, and runner-up for Nobel Prize.
Really?
No, but a part of you believed it.
Now, not everyone has an issue with this, but many people see her as lazy writing, as well as being the worst girlfriend that Nolan has had outside of Lucy. Because her character is dull, and she has zero chemistry with Nolan, and she is everywhere. Whenever something happens, she is there being annoying and know-it-all. I was really hoping she would eventually go away, but not happening apparently. Next up, we're going to talk about James Murray, a very polarizing character that was introduced in one of the darkest eras of the Rookie history. James was introduced in Season 3, Episode 2, Injustice, when the LAPD were arresting a man at a local park. He was filming the whole thing and was instigating the police. And when the police told him to quit it, he didn't back down. And later, he came back to call Nolan a white savior and accuse him of having bad intentions, when all Nolan was doing was trying to help his community. Overall, people saw James Murray as an over-dramatized anti-police character who basically was another Wesley, except Wesley actually was able to work past the issues with the police and do some good where he felt like he could, as well as he has an amazing relationship with his cop wife. Meanwhile, James is constantly antagonistic to Nyla, always puts down her work and makes her feel like she isn't doing enough. What's even crazier is that almost 5 seasons later, he still is like this towards his police friends, his police wife, and his overall attitude is awful. Not even mentioning how he actively helps fugitives like we saw in Season 7, Episode 9, The Kiss, with the Leonard Kelsey situation. And this isn't even mentioning the whole meeting situation where he had dozens of people bombard his wife. What I don't like or understand, he runs/owns a community center, lol. Why didn't he host there instead of his home is 1, crazy, and 2, they live on a quiet street, away from the crime/police problems. Plus, the community is not a fan of the cops right now, and she's a cop. He potentially put his life, her life, and their kids' lives in danger. I'm not saying they are or aren't in danger, but that threat is now there. Someone in my tier list videos comment section summarizes people's thoughts pretty well too. Not gonna lie, if James had died this most recent season where he got shot, I would not have been that upset. I would have been sad for Nyla and their kid, but honestly, the dude is disrespectful as hell to her about her job. I don't really understand what brings them together if he can't accept her for who she is. He wants to change her career, it feels like. Next up, we're going to talk about a character who's only had a few appearances, but has left a lasting mark on the show. In a bad way. We're talking about Simone Clark, the rookie FBI agent who later would become the main character of the Rookie Feds. Simone was first introduced in Season 4, Episode 19, appropriately named Simone, which was the first of 2 episodes that were connected to each other, where an FBI rookie is sent to Los Angeles to help them with the Enervo case. She later made another appearance in Season 5, Episode 10, The List, and Season 5, Episode 21, Going Under, which were crossover episodes with the Rookie Feds. The 2 episodes in Season 4 were actually backdoor pilot episodes for this new spin-off series, and while the showrunners thought this spin-off was a great idea, the writing was on the wall after Simone and Enervo were released. She was one of the most unrealistic portrayals of an FBI agent in the entire show, and we have had a lot of those throughout the show's history, including Agent Garza, who came from the Rookie Feds and then became a prominent character on his own in the later seasons of the main show. Even though she breaks the stereotype of female FBI agents, both physically and personality-wise, she still seems so unrealistic and just annoying. It wasn't just her mannerisms and unprofessionalism that people didn't like. It was also her voice that people had a problem with. It was her voice I couldn't stand, going all the way back to when she was on Reno 911. Nash's voice has always driven me crazy, and her overly maternal way of speaking to people, calling suspects or witnesses sugar, sweetie, or honey, I mean, that should be grounds for disciplinary measures alone. It's incredibly unprofessional. Next up, we're going to talk about another fairly new addition to the show, Raj Bronson, who was a completely unnamed gag character until halfway through season 7. Raj was first introduced in season 5, episode 13, Daddy Cop, in the intro to the episode. He was the singer of the garage band that was singing the song Daddy Cop, the gag song made about Nolan. The audience absolutely loved this gag, so the showrunners brought it back in the next season in season 6, episode 2, The Hammer. But this time they one-upped the song with a choir and a guitar solo. Once again, everyone loved it. The showrunners saw this love, but they took the wrong thing away from it. He came back as Selena's new boyfriend in season 7, episode 10, Chaos Agent, and has been a recurring character ever since. He isn't a super prominent character, but as soon as he became Selena's boyfriend, the audience immediately started to dislike him. Let's dive into why. Some important context you need is that Raj is played by Xander Hawley, the son of the creator of the show. Xander did not have any acting experience before being added to the show, and so the character of Raj was acted out very badly. His personality and tone was super flat, and people thought he was completely out of place. This is coupled with the fact that the fans didn't like the nepotism aspect of it either. He is so wooden and stiff. I normally don't talk actors because I know I couldn't do what they do, but I genuinely think I could act better than him. The running gag where he'd occasionally show up to harass Nolan with music was hilarious, but as a village idiot boyfriend character, he is insufferable. He adds nothing to the show. He is literally just there because of his dad. The Daddy Cop song was funny the first couple of times, now it's just meh. Next up, we're going to talk about Monica Stevens, a character who was introduced as someone in line with Elijah Stone. But then they took her character and took her to insufferable levels. She was first introduced at the tail end of the Elijah Stone arc, and at first, she was just a crooked lawyer who took advantage where she could in order to make more money. This was fine, and people found her to be a great addition to an otherwise overstayed story arc. Then, Elijah's reign ended, and she started doing things on her own. Okay, makes sense. But then as season 6 went on, she became this almighty and unstoppable force that apparently just has tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars just laying around. This was one of the main reasons that people don't like her. But another one is that she very much overstayed her welcome. If she had been killed off or taken care of when Elijah was taken down, or even somewhat into season 6, people would have still had a pretty good opinion of her. But now we're going into season 8, and not only is she still here, but now she has immunity and is running an international crime ring. Nobody is liking where this storyline is going and wants it to end. I'm tired of her. Everyone likes to call Bailey a Mary Sue, while Monica is like the evil Mary Sue, and it's way more annoying. They're making the same mistake they made with Elijah, having Monica overstay her welcome. Her storyline should have been resolved last season, regardless of how short that season was. I can't wait for her to disappear. I am sick of her character. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard every time she threatens to sue. Now we're going to talk about a character who we haven't heard from in a very long time. We're going to talk about Professor Ryan, a character who was very prominent throughout the entirety of the 3rd season when Nolan went to night school. She had a very similar purpose to James Murray and Doug Stanton, which was to help highlight racism and discrimination in policing. But very much like James, her inclusion made the narrative fall flat for a lot of viewers. One of her most hated appearances was in season 3, episode 9, Amber, when she tagged along with Nolan and Harper on patrol. The audience believed that Ryan was just flat out not listening to Nolan or Harper and was too set in her ways, as well as kept guilt tripping them just because they are cops. I would like to disagree on the unbiased Banner part. She took no action when John was harassed by the BLM leftists in college. She even allowed it. Being a cop isn't need to know, in a class filled with cop haters. She was in the show to cover the BLM quota. Most useless and annoying character in the show in my opinion. She was insufferable. I can't stand her. It's clear that the audience were not receptive to Ryan, and it's understandable why she never returned. These were some of the most hated characters on The Rookie and why they are hated. There are 7 specific characters on The Rookie that are perfect examples of the 7 deadly sins. But on the flip side, there's another 7 characters that embodied the opposite. the 7 heavenly virtues. In this video, we're going to be comparing the rookie characters that embody the 7 deadly sins against their contradicting heavenly virtues. We're going to be starting with greed versus charity. The rookie character that exemplifies greed the most is Oscar Hutchinson, someone who only cares about himself and what he can gain, and he will do anything to get it, even if it means helping some truly despicable people. Oscar is a sociopath, someone who cannot comprehend what it feels like to feel empathy for others and doubles that into his own self-worth. One of the craziest offenses that show his greed the most is when he helps Monica get information on the employer of the assailant who tried to kill her. He, along with Jason Weiler, beat a man half to death for this information, all in exchange to be able to escape prison. Meanwhile, this information made Monica extremely powerful and has allowed her to do much more damage down the line. But this didn't matter to Oscar. It doesn't concern him. It was never even a thought in his mind. And that's because he's full of greed. Meanwhile, on the other side, Aaron Thorson falls into the definition of charity. While Aaron is extremely rich and finds value in materialistic things, this doesn't mean he only uses it for himself. In multiple occasions, Aaron has been selfless with his money and resources, as well as he doesn't hesitate to use his money to assist with cases. One example of using his money selflessly in order to help a case is in Season 5, Episode 1. This was when Tim and Lucy were supposed to get on a plane to Vegas for their undercover operation, which was not in their playbook and an extremely dangerous situation. This is because the LAPD couldn't get a flight in time to give them backup, basically leaving Tim and Lucy in the dark if things go sideways. But Aaron steps in and uses his private jet to get the LAPD to Vegas in time, marking a very selfless and expensive act, and this proves that Aaron is full of charity.
Pulling the plug.
Oh, wait, hold on. The pilot has to file a flight plan.
Paperwork to get that authorized will take all day, and your wheel's up in an hour.
I mean, I can get a private jet there in 45 minutes. Also, what kind of caviar do you guys like?
Now we're moving on to sloth versus diligence. The person who embodies sloth in the rookie the most is Officer Schmitty, a seasoned officer who does everything in his power to do the least work he can. From the very beginning of the show, despite working at the department for 20 years, he finds every way to do the most menial jobs. He works front desk, he takes the lowest level of calls, and when he actually is on a higher level call, he's borderline useless and does the least amount of heavy lifting possible. Up until Nolan became the union representative, Smitty was the union rep, but even in that position, he did very little work. This is evident during the union rep election, where in the video that Tamara snuck in, Smitty full on admits that he doesn't do anything, as he says he can't beat Nolan on the issues. He really only does this job because it's easy work.
Making things right. So, what do you want this video to be?
Something embarrassing for Nolan. I can't beat the guy on the issues. I gotta play dirty to beat him. That's not me. She said she wasn't recording.
There's no expectations of privacy here.
In most scenes we see him in during the show, he's doing literally nothing productive. Like when he was taking bets on Tim and Lucy's breakup in Season 6, instead of, actually doing work.
You still taking bets on the breakup?
You know it.
$100 says Tim cheated.
You sure? It's running 5 to 1 against.
Yeah, bigger risk, bigger reward.
What are you doing?
I was never even here.
Smitty may be lazy, but someone who is the opposite is John Nolan, the representative of diligence, meaning he is devoted and dedicated to painstaking work in order to meet his goals. Nolan, from the very beginning, had to endure an uphill battle in his career, with Sergeant Gray making it his mission for Nolan to quit, Bishop initially looking for any reason to wash him out. He had many obstacles to get to where he is now. Another massive obstacle is when he was reprimanded in Season 1, then being informed that he will never make it past being a P2 in his career. Anyone else would have either quit or make do with what they had. But this didn't stop Nolan. He gave his 100% at all times, and all of this work ended up paying off. As in Season 5, Episode 1, he was given a golden ticket for his work at the border.
In light of your courageous and exemplary service, I've decided to offer you any assignment in the LAPD. It's what we unofficially call a golden ticket.
Thank you, ma'am.
Despite being told he would never amount to anything, as well as with people preying on his downfall, he still managed to persevere, giving him the spot as a heavenly virtue. But someone who is a deadly sin, the sin of pride, is Rosalind Dyer, the psychopathic killer who believes she is the best of the best in what she does. She emits a sense of confidence that cannot be compared to anyone else on the show, and it's to a point where her confidence was part of her own demise. What do I mean by that? Let's go to her last episode, season 5, episode 4, The Choice, where her pride literally ended her life. She made a contraption to kill Nolan's fiance, Bailey, in order to coax Nolan into doing what she wants. She forces Nolan to go to a mansion where they would have dinner, and at the end of this dinner, Rosalind played a live feed of Bailey's inevitable death, according to her. In order for Nolan to save her, he has to kill Rosalind in order to turn him into a murderer. She was so confident in this plan working, but she ended up being wrong. Nolan didn't kill her, and she was arrested. Fortunately for her, she had more enemies, and she was sniped and killed on her way to being booked, ending her reign. Even though she would have died either way, her overconfidence in her plans made her have to resort to this, making her a very prideful, sinful woman. However, someone who isn't sinful and represents humility is Officer Bishop, even if she wasn't always that way. Talia started off as someone who was very by the books and followed all orders given, including Gray's orders to make Nolan's training as hard as possible. However, eventually, Bishop gives Nolan a bigger leash, and she is surprisingly impressed with what she sees. She sees somebody with a different set of life experience and skills, and she is stood corrected. She begins to admire his work and realize she was wrong, showing a sense of humility and making it onto this list. Now, before we move on to our next set, I've decided to lump 2 sets of couples into these groups instead of individual people. We are now going over lust versus chastity, starting with Jake and Sava as the embodiment of lust. Lust describes an intense desire of sexual intimacy and relations, and these two fit the bill to a T. In almost every scene they're in, they are all over each other, making out, hands in places that are at best inappropriate, and at worst, they're disgusting in terms of public display of affection. These desires don't even just stop with their own relationship, because they also have caused each other to break the sanctity of their relationship by cheating on each other. Her best friend, who was previously seen when he was released from prison due to overcrowding. This ended up coming with a price because Sava was so enraged that she killed him, and Jake's body is found in the episode Double Trouble. This wouldn't have happened if Jake and Sava's relationship wasn't built on lust. But do you know whose relationship was built on chastity? Gray and Luna, the most stable and loving relationship in the show. Chastity doesn't mean to abstain from sexual relationships as a whole, but rather is to have those relationships built on love, genuine feelings, and respect for one another. This perfectly describes the long-term marriage of Lieutenant Gray and Luna. Every time they're seen together, they treat each other with love and kindness, and they are not overly affectionate in public, staying away from what are considered lustful actions. This also stems down to their daughter, who benefits from their healthy relationship as well. Watching their scenes alongside Jake and Sava is a night and day comparison with how a relationship can benefit from more wholesome actions versus ones filled with lust. And that's why they fall here on this list. Next up, we'll be talking about envy and putting it up against kindness. On the sinful side, we have Officer Penn as envious. While this isn't exactly true after season 7 episode 13, in the beginning of that episode, however, Penn is extremely envious of his old friend AJ Knox, as well as envious about his current life and career versus where he could have been if he was able to still continue football. Before joining the LAPD, Miles was on track to be a professional football player. Unfortunately, he was injured while playing and had to quit entirely. Luckily, he eventually healed and joined the LAPD, and he was fine until he reunited with AJ again, making him jealous. He could have had the same lifestyle, the cars, the parties, the women, but now he can't have that, and he found himself comparing his life to AJ's. He was envious of him, to the point where when he was offered the chance to share that lifestyle with him by being private security for AJ, he really wanted to take it. Fortunately though, he didn't take it, as Tim talked him through it and Penn realized he didn't want that. Luckily for him, his envy subsided. On the other side of envy, we have kindness, and that goes to Lucy Chen. Lucy is a very polite, soft, and caring person who is nice to almost every person she meets. Of course, there's some exceptions for most criminals, but even with some criminals, she still shows compassion for those people. One example is with Tamara Collins, a teenager who steals her car so she can have a place to stay and or sell it for money, depending on when you asked her. Even though Tamara did this, Lucy took her under her wing and supported her. She bought her clothes, gave her money, and kept close tabs on her in the beginning. Eventually, in the season 4 episode 5 Minutes, when Tamara got her life back on track, Lucy offered her a place to stay as her roommate, giving Tamara an even better chance of success. This is one of the kindest things a human can do for another, which is why I feel this alone should give her the virtue of kindness. Next, we are going to go over Wrath versus Patience. And for Wrath, I decided to go with Sandra de la Cruz, aka La Fiera. This Wrath was unleashed after the death of her son, but before that, she had reasons to keep it under lockdown. Before her son's death, she stayed out of the LAPD's way, and she had a sense of humanity and empathy. Despite her being a massive criminal, she still bonded with Detective Lopez over their shared motherhood, and her wrath got the better of her. When her wrath was unleashed, she was devastated. She was feeling the pain of losing her child, and she blamed Lopez for this loss. So in the ending episodes of season 3, she kidnaps Lopez, taking her to Guatemala to basically be an incubator for Lopez's baby, where once the baby is born, she would be killed and La Fiera would take the baby. This is incredibly cruel, and not even the most violent criminals would think to do this. This makes her a strong example for the sin of wrath. On the other side of the coin, an example for the virtue of patience is James, the husband of Officer Nyla Harper. He's an activist for police reform and is willing to make it happen in any way possible, but unlike some others who believe in police reform that want an immediate change, he believes in the long-term change. He is patient, wanting to do everything right despite it being the longer route. He wants to get police officers involved voluntarily, works for the community, and doesn't push on his wife to get things done faster. These are things that someone who is impatient would never do, and he shows a strong stance on doing things the right way. This is what lands him in the virtue of patience. Now for the next sin and virtue, which are gluttony and temperance. For this one, I'll be doing something a little different for gluttony. Instead of talking about the character, we're going to be talking about the actor of Jackson West, aka Titus Mackin Jr. Gluttony isn't just about food, but rather an unhealthy indulgence where nothing feels like enough. He forced a specific storyline into season 3 of the show by saying he was leaving the show and would only stay if they did said storyline. If they did it, he would stay for future seasons. This, however, was a lie. Season 3 was filmed during the height of the BLM movement, and both Titus and Richard Jones, the actor of Sergeant Gray, requested a storyline involving racial discrimination. They agreed, however, Titus wanted more. He wanted this storyline to last the majority of the season, as well as to have several subplots including racial discrimination as well. This made fans feel like the season was heavily politicized and caused the season to overall have a controversial reception even today. Once the season finished up and it was time to film season 4, Titus dipped and said he wasn't going to film anymore. This left the story writers high and dry, and they had to rewrite a lot of the show on very little notice. To add salt into the wound, he wouldn't even record a scene to kill his character off, and they needed a double for him for those scenes. This tarnished his reputation overall and shows that nothing would have ever been enough for a gluttonous actor like Titus. Now back to the characters. We head to the character who represents temperance the most, the Hammer. This may seem like a weird pick, but hear me out. Temperance is the quality of moderation or self-restraint. In the Hammer's case, it's his moderation of crime. There's some things he will do, such as gun trafficking. However, there's other things he won't do, such as betraying a police deal. There are 2 examples of this. One in season 6 episode appropriately named The Hammer. Hammer buys Nolan's wedding ring that Skip Tracer Randy stole and pawned off. Tim and Lucy go to retrieve it, and Hammer offers them to fight him for it. If they win, he'll give them the ring. Long story short, Tim wins the fight, and the Hammer hands it over with no argument. On the second occasion, in season 7's episode, The Mickey, when Mickey and him get caught trafficking guns, they're given a deal to rat out a bigger fish. Mickey tries to betray this deal, by knocking Tim out and holding him at gunpoint, and he tells Hammer to get Nolan's gun and they can escape. But surprisingly, Hammer rejects this and beats up Mickey to save Tim because he wants his deal and to start a new life. This moderation and restraint of escape is what puts him in the temperance virtue. That's all 7 of the deadly sins and heavenly virtues with the Rookie characters. There have been multiple cast members of The Rookie who have left the show and are no longer around. Some of them only lasted 1 season, whereas others left after a multiple season run. And in this video, we are going to talk about every cast member who left, their story, and why they left the show. The first cast member to ever leave the show on their own terms was Afton Williamson, the actress for Talia Bishop. Afton joined the show at the beginning of its run, starting in the pilot episode. She was in every single episode of the first season. But then when the second season started, she was never to be seen again. People wondered where she went and why she disappeared seemingly at random. The show never put out a statement on why she left. They only said that she quit the LAPD and moved to being a special agent. This was after the information involving her foster brother started to come out, where her foster brother was a convicted felon. She left him off the list of her siblings on her LAPD application, because if you're a part of the LAPD, you can't have any felon family members. But behind the scenes, the reason, or should I say reasons, that Afton Williamson left the show were a lot more complicated. On August 4th, 2019, a month and a half before the second season premiered, she put out a post on Instagram that told everybody why she was leaving the show and would never return. And the reasons that she gave really put the show, its crew, and its cast on blast. The post starts with, "I will not be returning for season 2 of The Rookie. I owe it to you, my amazing fans, to share the truth." She then cites her first reason for leaving, which was that she felt that she was discriminated against because of her race. "I experienced racial discrimination / racially charged inappropriate comments from the hair department and bullying from executive producers." She expanded on this later down in the post, and the racist commentary and bullying from the hair department head, Sally Siganovich, escalated into sexual assault at our rap party. Afton said that even though all of this was reported to the showrunner, the incident remained undocumented and was not brought to HR, even though he promised that it would. According to her, Siganovich was fired, but this was after an entire year of Afton having to deal with the racially charged language while in the trailers. Continuing on to her next point, she laid out a very heavy accusation against one of her co-stars, Demetrius Gross, the actor for Detective Wolf. It continued along with sexual harassment from a recurring guest star, Demetrius Gross. She goes further into it later on, stating, "After my initial reports of sexual harassment, I was assured that Gross would be fired. However, Afton claims that she was asked to film scenes with him the very next day, despite them not starting on those episodes, which meant that they had time to switch things around. But then, at the end of the season, she saw Gross's name on the call sheet, and this is where Alexi admitted that he was not fired and that HR wasn't ever even involved. In the post, she says that she was asked to return this season and promised that everything was handled. The problem was that season 2 already started filming, and the investigation hadn't even started. She knew that this is going to be an ongoing issue, and so she quit right then and there, and she was never seen on the show again. Obviously, when these accusations came out, the entire Rookie fanbase was shocked. This info going public also brought in a few law firms to investigate what happened. During the investigation, they conducted 400 hours of interviews and went through days worth of footage to find evidence of this. Unfortunately for Afton, the allegations she made didn't have any evidence, and therefore nothing was going to happen. She was heartbroken by this and claimed that the producers covered up the truth. To this day, we'll never know if the accusations were true or false, as just because there was no evidence doesn't exactly mean some of what she said wasn't actually true. She hasn't posted on social media in over 5 years now and hasn't acted since, and I hope that she's doing well now. Moving on to our next actor who voluntarily left the show, Titus Mackin Jr., the actor for Jackson West. I've talked about his story in previous videos, but I've never went really in depth into the specifics of things, so that's what we're going to do now. Titus was also on the show from the beginning with the pilot, but the difference between him and Afton was that he went on past the first season. as he was in the entirety of the first 3 seasons of the show before he decided to part ways. However, their reasons for leaving are not exactly entirely different. This next part is going to go over a lot of American politics. Let's go back to early 2020. The BLM movement started to gain momentum due to the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor going viral online. These two were just mere examples of the many individuals who were being killed by police officers at the time. But these two going viral lit a spark into the movement and turned this topic into a mainstream talking point, especially with everyone being at home and constantly being online. There was no hiding from the fact that this was a serious issue, and for a cop show like The Rookie, it was almost guaranteed that they were going to have to tackle it eventually, especially with season 2 airing during the rise of the movement. Titus started to become concerned about if he could continue playing his part in the show, being a black man himself. He felt that it was a moral conflict, and he was going to leave the show right then and there, but the showrunners didn't want him to leave. They begged him to continue doing the show, and this is when a negotiation type thing started to begin. Titus, alongside Richard T. Jones, the actor for Lieutenant Gray, went to the showrunners with a request that they cover racial discrimination and police brutality in the show, and the show agreed to do so. But Titus decided that he wanted more than just a plot. The entire 3rd season needed to center around this, and Titus said that if they did this, he would continue to play Jackson in the show for future seasons. As the show didn't want to lose another one of their main cast, they agreed to this. Season 3 then started to air, and the biggest plot line of the season was about Jackson's new training officer, Doug Stanton, played by Brandon Routh. This new training officer was written to be an overly racist cop who had a prejudice against black citizens. This would put Jackson in danger throughout the episodes and put him in a moral dilemma, similar to the one that he was dealing with in real life. After an incident where Wes was badly beaten by several criminals and Stanton just sat and watched, Stanton was put on leave and transferred to another department. This would not save Stanton though, as Wes would then go to that department and show them the same footage. That was the main story involving race in the 3rd season, but this wasn't the only one. The show leaned into the movement throughout the entire rest of the season, as new elements were introduced, such as the character of James Murray. This season was extremely controversial during its airing, as people believed the themes were too over the top and in the face of the viewers. But the show was ready to get back to how they previously wrote it, and they were starting to write for season 4. However, Titus thought about it for a while and decided that the show still didn't do enough to keep him on the show. So he went to the showrunners and told them that he was going to be leaving anyways. This caused the writers to have to go back and write him out of everything, as well as give his character an extremely unsatisfying exit. A 10-second scene where Jackson is shot in the back by La Fiera's crew. What's even worse is that this was a stunt double and not Titus playing Jackson, as he left before they could record a proper send-off. This made fans upset, since they thought he could have at least just returned for a better ending to his character. After The Rookie, Titus took a long break from acting, and he started focusing on his music career. He did make an attempt to return to acting, however, looking at his IMDb page, it shows that he has not been in many projects since his departure, showing he's only been in one project in the last 3 years. His music career unfortunately shows similar results, as looking at his YouTube page for his music, his top song has 109,000 views, where all of the others are under 100,000. So unfortunately, it looks like Titus's career took a massive hit overall after his departure from the show. Now we head on to the first actor who left the show where it wasn't entirely his decision. True Valentino, the actor for Aaron Thorson. Aaron was introduced in Season 4, Episode 2, 5 Minutes as a new rookie, and he was a recurring character for the rest of Season 4 and became a main character for the entire 5th and 6th seasons. However, when teasers of Season 7 started dropping, fans were noticing that Aaron wasn't in any of them. People became concerned that Aaron was being kicked off from the show, and unfortunately, their suspicions were correct. Aaron Thorson was not going to return for the 7th season. True went on his Instagram story on August 9th, 2024, and talked vaguely about his departure, saying that it was such an amazing opportunity and that he felt so lucky to have had the last 3 seasons, thanking the fans for being the best. What had people very confused though was the end. You never know who may pop back up in the Mid-Wilshire precinct. Until then, 7 Adam 19, this is Aaron Thorson over and out. This told people that unlike Jackson a few seasons earlier, Aaron wasn't going to be killed off. and that there may be something more to the story. Later on, Alexi Hawley came out and explained why Aaron Thorson wasn't returning. He said that it was for creative reasons, and that he believed that Aaron's story had come to an end. But he did tell us that the door was open for True to come back and play as Aaron again in the future. True Valentino is a great actor, and he was a huge part of our show for several seasons, and we'd love to have him back in some capacity. He also confirmed that he was still alive in the Rookie universe. When season 7 started, we found out that Aaron transferred to North Hollywood. Unfortunately, as of right now, we still have no idea if True will ever come back to be Aaron, and that disappoints me a lot personally, because Aaron is and always will be my favorite character in the show. Hopefully what they said about the door being open is true and we can see him again one day. Now to talk about Mercedes Mason, the actress for Captain Zoe Anderson. She also wasn't around for very long, as she was only around for the first 16 episodes of the show before her sudden death in season 1 episode 16, Greenlight. This episode is consistently praised as one of the best episodes in the show, but despite that, fans still don't understand why she was killed off in the first place. Not only was it so early into the show, but it was also abrupt. Just the episode before, there was no indication that she would have been permanently killed off. And then the next, she's gone, just like that. Interestingly, Mercedes never actually spoke out about why she left the Rookie. The most she ever did was live tweet during the episode, "I just want to say thank you guys for being supportive of the show and me." However, there was clearly no bad blood, given that she returned for a flashback scene involving Nolan, Lucy, and Jackson graduating from the academy. But the question still remained, why? Alexi Hawley came out after the episode aired about the reason, where he revealed that it wasn't always the plan that she was going to be killed off. We went back and forth about it in the writer's room, but it unfortunately felt like the most dramatic and powerful way to impact our story. It's heartbreaking, but the stakes of this new life Nolan has chosen are all too real, and we can't run away from them creatively. So the reason for her departure was purely for creative reasons, and they wanted to impact Nolan as much as possible early on, as at this point of the show, he is still considered the central character, or that's what everyone thought was the reason that she left. She also left the show because of her newborn baby. In an Instagram post that she made on May 12, 2020, over a year after her departure, she talks about her experience on the show while dealing with this newborn baby. "I was on set of The Rookie and could barely keep my eyes open or remember my lines. Leaked through shirts due to milk production. Hated myself and felt guilty for leaving Chaos even for a moment." So while this was not initially shared by either Mercedes nor the show, we later found out that this was another reason that her departure came so early. Those were the 4 cast members to leave the show and why they left. The Rookie is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I love taking every opportunity I get to glaze the show, but I'm not gonna lie and say that it's perfect. So today, I'm going to switch things up and talk about everything I personally do not like about The Rookie and explain why I feel this way. And stay tuned, because some of these may be some pretty hot takes. The first thing I want to talk about, or I guess the first person I want to talk about, is Monica Stevens and how much I loathe her storyline. Look, I thought Monica was an interesting addition to the show when she was first introduced, being the crooked lawyer that gave Elijah whatever he wanted when Wesley couldn't. And then adding the fact that she was Wesley's ex-fiance, I actually really liked it. But then when Elijah was defeated and she moved on to being a centimillionaire criminal mastermind, I started to lose my patience with her. Every episode that passed, her storyline just got more and more ridiculous to the point where it wasn't even intriguing anymore. And now we're heading into season 8, and not only is she still here, but she has immunity? How in the world is this plot ever going to be solved? She's basically become the ruler of the world when it comes to the show, and I hate this so much. I'm hoping that she's killed off within the first couple episodes of the new season, because if not, I'm gonna lose a lot of interest in what's going on in the main plot of the show. The next thing I want to talk about that I really dislike about the show is how they've really started to neglect the other couples of the show for Chenford. I am a massive Lopez fan, and I have been ever since I first started watching the show. Watching them grow not only as a couple, but also as individuals was amazing to see, and I became more glued to their story. But as Chenford started to form, Lopez, along with every other couple, started being pushed towards the sidelines to show Tim and Lucy instead. Listen, I am not a Chenford hater, and I am not trying to say that they shouldn't be a thing, but their relationship has caused the showrunners to neglect the rest. When was the last time we really got to see growth come from Nyla and James' relationship? What about Lopez? Bailey and Nolan haven't been neglected as much, but I'm pretty sure that is because it involves Nolan, who's the main character of the whole show. But the other two couples especially have been neglected to shine a light on Tim and Lucy instead. I have a couple other gripes with Chenford, but we'll get back to those later. Let's move on to the third thing that I dislike about the show, and that is that I feel like the terrible timeline breaks the immersion of the show for me. Maybe I'm taking the show a little too seriously when I complain about this, but I think there's way too many inconsistencies involving the timeline that just make me more confused than anything else. One of my biggest gripes with the timeline involves ages, since there's some age discrepancies that literally break the lore of some characters. Let me bring up the biggest examples, which are John and Henry Nolan, as well as the age difference between the two. When the show began, John Nolan was said to be a 45-year-old man, and it's also mentioned that his son, Henry, was born when he was 20 years old. But this gets annihilated as soon as Henry is introduced, as when we meet him in season 1, he is 20 years old. This is an issue because he's supposed to be 25 at this time, but in the matter of half a season, they already break the timeline. Okay, whatever. They got an age wrong. Not a big deal. But then they decide to change the age of Henry between episodes. In one episode, he's 20 years old. In the next episode, he's 19 years old. And then he's 20 again after that. How does any of that make any sense at all? Now back to John. Like I mentioned earlier, he's supposed to be 45 years old in the pilot, which takes place in 2018. But now in season 7, he's 49 years old, despite it taking place in 2025. This means he has aged 4 years within the last 7 years in the show. I think I've rambled enough about ages, so let me just talk about another timeline issue that really grinds my gears. We need to talk about Selena Juarez and the tragedy that is her timeline. She is introduced in season 5 of the show, which takes place in 2021 according to the timeline. But according to season 6, it jumps all the way to 2024. And like I mentioned earlier, season 7 takes place in 2025. Why is this all important? Because this would imply that Selena Juarez has been a rookie for 3 to 4 years rather than the 12 months it usually takes. Having a rookie stay a rookie for multiple seasons isn't a novel concept though, since they did this back in seasons 1 to 3 with John, Lucy, and Jackson. But the difference with them is that those seasons took place over the span of the same 13-month period. Now that they have this massive time jump between the seasons, it makes her probationary period absolutely ridiculous. And I'm hoping they don't do the same thing with Miles. Okay, I'm sure you don't want me complaining about the timeline anymore, so I'm just gonna move on. Let's go back to Chenford. I have to talk about Chenford and how I heavily dislike the writing of the couple, as well as the writing of their story. Like I said earlier, I do not hate Chenford as a concept, nor either of the characters. I actually really like both Tim and Lucy, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice some negative changes in their characters and storylines that came from Chenford being introduced. Earlier on in the show's run, Tim was a very rigid, strict TO that was emotionally guarded and had his walls up. This was such a good contrast when interacting with everyone else, especially with Lucy, who needed that type of figure during her training. His rigidness also was super funny when interacting with characters like Lopez, who would just get on his nerves.
I got your back, boo.
But when he got with Lucy and even after the relationship, no matter how hard he tried with Miles and others, that tough guy persona just wasn't the same anymore since he started to soften up. This personality change I honestly don't mind as much, since it's less one-dimensional and makes him more of a dynamic character. But where I really don't like the personality changes with Chenford is the changes with Lucy. It feels like after Lucy and Tim got together, Lucy just kind of became Tim's second half, and the show was taking away her personal agency. She worked so hard during the first half of the show and had to overcome so much, but it feels like it's all being overshadowed with Chenford. This is all too common in shows, where the woman of a ship will get overshadowed by the relationship rather than being known for her own accomplishments. And I think that Lucy deserves way better than that, as she's one of the best characters in the whole show. Now to talk about how they're writing Chenford's story. I hate what they're doing with Chenford right now. Everything they did during season 7 really grinded my gears, because instead of giving them any actual development and building on their story, they would just tease the audience with little snippets to get them hyped up and ready to watch the next episode. Yet as episodes passed, nothing of actual substance ever actually happened. The biggest example of this was in season 7, episode 15, A Deadly Secret. Remember how they were locked down in the hospital and were talking about baby names in their relationship? I do. Do you remember what this information ended up leading to? I don't. Oh wait, it didn't lead to anything. That is my gripe. They're writing Chenford stuff just to keep the audience on their toes on whether they'll get back together or not, and then never actually give us anything. I get Chenford being in the show, but Alexi, please just give us something of substance for once. Alright, I feel like I've said enough about Chenford, so I'm just going to move on to the next thing that I really don't like about the show. This one may be more popular than others in this video, but I'm going to say it anyway. The more that I rewatch The Rookie for these videos, the more I dislike Bailey, her background, her personality, and her relationship with Nolan as a whole. And each one of these things is for different reasons. I hate how she basically can do anything. She isn't just part of the LAFD, she is the LAFD. She is everywhere. Do they need a paramedic? Bailey. Do they need a firefighter? Bailey. Do they need a dancer? Bailey, I guess. I don't understand why she needs to have everything under her belt. She is fine as just a firefighter, maybe with some military experience under her belt. Oh wait, she's a lieutenant in the reserves too. I don't get why they had her do so much. Now onto her personality. I think that she is so flat. The way that she talks to people, including Nolan, just feels forced and has no genuinity attached to it. I remember back in my tier list video, I mentioned that I think Nolan and Bailey are good together, but the more that I watch them, the more I disagree with my previous opinion. They have pretty much no chemistry at all. And what makes it even worse is that Nolan dated more than one woman that would have been much better suited for him. By far, Grace Sawyer would have been the best match with Nolan. I thought they had amazing chemistry, and when I first watched the show, I thought they would have been endgame. That is until the show decided to call it quits, for some reason. I never really understood why they broke Nolan and her up, but I think it was a disservice to John's story. And if they didn't turn Jessica into some weird psycho who killed a suspect without any lethal force sent her way, she could have been a good match for Nolan too. But then they threw that away with what I mentioned above, as well as the whole kids thing. And then Lucy, no, that deserved to end the way it did. Anyway, I think you could see that I don't like Bailey, and I think this opinion will only get stronger the more I rewatch this show. Moving on, I want to talk about something involving Captain Anderson, and I did gloss over this a little bit in my video that I made about her and her story, which I'll leave a link to at the end of this one as well as in the description. But the one part of her story that I didn't like was the way that it ended. Look, I think that the way she went out was great. I think killing her off the way that they did was amazing for Officer Nolan's story and to give him motivation to be a better cop. However, a counterpoint I want to make is why did they do it so damn early into the show? We only saw her for 16 episodes before she was killed off. There was so much that we never learned about her, and this is partially because the show just didn't give us enough time with her. I also think that her death would have been more impactful not only for Nolan, but also for the audience if they killed her off towards the time that they killed off Nick Armstrong, like around the end of season 2 or the beginning of season 3. The show missed the opportunity to get the audience extremely attached to this character, learning about all of her death and her backstory, and then killing her off. I love her and her story, but the timing kind of ruins it for me. I know that I've been pretty critical about some aspects of the show during this video, but I just want to reiterate that I love this show very much, and I wouldn't make videos about it if I didn't. I'm just hoping that the showrunners can fix some of these things in the next season, like the Monica Stevens plotline and the dragging of Chenford, but I guess we'll just have to see. That is everything that I hate about The Rookie. The Rookie is a show filled with crazy moments. Nukes.
Back off or I'll blow us all up!
Fighting mob leaders.
That's the only one you're gonna land.
Serial killers.
So take the shot.
And so much more. But one thing that nobody talks about are the episodes on the other side of the coin. Episodes where things seem normal for a change. And in this video, we're going to take the most normal episode from each season, and then we're going to figure out which one is the most normal of the entire show. Let's start with season 1, where a lot of things are a lot less crazy than they are in the more recent seasons. The show was just finding its footing, so they did their best at sticking with the basics. This was especially apparent in the earlier episodes, and season 1 episode 2, Crash Course, is no different. In this episode, Nolan has two different things happen. Number 1, he has to arrest a man in front of his kid, and number 2, he saves a woman from someone who had her captured in his basement. Meanwhile, Lucy had to deal with having a bum of a TO for that day, even though she actually wanted to go out and do something instead of sitting around and writing tickets. Then, Jackson and Lopez are taking care of arresting a guy who is going crazy on PCP. All of these plot points are pretty crazy if you hold them to the standards of normal people, or even real-life police. However, comparing it to the rest of the season, it is light work. Within season 1, the LAPD dealt with dismantling the empire of a gang after they tried to kill Nolan, then them killing Anderson, controlling a deadly virus that could kill the entirety of Los Angeles, and having to rile up 20 escaped inmates after the bus crashes and the driver dies. When looking at Crash Course comparatively, it's very mundane and quote-unquote normal. Now, let's move on to season 2. This is where the show started to take more risks and make more crazy and wild plot lines. But this doesn't mean that every episode was like that, and season 2 episode 2, The Night General, is going at the top of that list. This episode had a few random plot points throughout the beginning of the episode, such as the large guy at the hospital, as well as Smitty helping Jackson move into the trailer park in the parking lot. But the first big point of the episode was finding the dead body of Jeff, as well as his parents tied up in the closet. The rest of the episode is spent figuring out what happened to him, but in the end, Nolan finds out that the father tried murdering the people who killed his son. And Nolan is left with a choice: prevent the father from ending it all, or help Nick Armstrong save one of the guys in the cement. And Nolan chose the latter. And while I love this episode, it's definitely the most normal of the season. When you have episodes like The Dark Side, Day of Death, Now and Then, Warriors and Guardians, and The Hunt in this season, this episode is just a drop in the bucket. Next up, we have season 3, the most controversial season of the entire show. There are a lot of insane episodes in this season, but season 3 episode 2, Injustice, is not up to the level of the rest. This episode starts off with introducing the Jackson and Doug Stanton plotline, as well as the James Murray plotline. Both of these are very mundane and don't really add much to this episode specifically. Then we have the drunk guy in the girl's car, as well as Tamara being caught taking Lucy's car. Both are not nearly to the level as some of the other things in this show. These are things that cops in real life probably deal with relatively commonly. The only large plot point that I could think of in this episode was the part where they raid the lab being made. And even though this part is really gruesome, I still don't think that it compares to some of the other insane episodes that this season has to offer. Threshold, Consequences, which is the episode where Nolan had to deal with the aftermath of the Nick Armstrong situation, the La Fiera episode, as well as True Crime, the episode about a celebrity religious group, all come to mind as episodes that are much crazier than Injustice. Moving on to season 4, a season with some of the most interesting and compelling episodes in the entire show for me. There are so many good episodes in this season, even if some of them aren't as interesting, such as season 4, episode 21, Mother's Day. This episode's main plot is the couple that robbed the place that Lopez and Wesley's mom were celebrating Mother's Day at. This ticks Lopez off, obviously, since Wesley's mom was stolen from, and so she spends the rest of the day tracking them down and capturing them, which was pretty easy since these criminals weren't exactly smart about it. Live streaming where they were, egging on the LAPD, as well as them taking the wedding clothes, which led the LAPD to believe that they were getting married at a wedding chapel. Meanwhile, Nolan and Gray are dealing with this situation involving Daniel in the witness protection program, as well as him running off to go see his mom and having people go after him. Overall, this episode has a lot of elements in it that I'm sure the real LAPD actually deal with in real life. Stupid criminals, robberies, and witness protection scandals. And while the ending was more intense, It doesn't compare to episodes such as the La Fiera plotline in Life and Death, the zombie outbreak in ACH, the chaos involving the gold in Poetic Justice, or the events of the Aaron Thorson case in Real Crime. Now we have Season 5. And this one was really easy to figure out, as almost every episode in this season has something insane going on in it. The one that is the least like the rest, though, is Season 5, Episode 20, STR. This episode starts off with Lucy and Tim helping Isabel with an undercover friend of hers. It seemed like she was in trouble, and so the three of them had to work together to figure out what happened. They go on to interview a few people, including the friend's father, who seemingly had no idea what happened and wants them to find her. Towards the end, they do find her, but then 4 shooters are on their way to get her. A shootout begins, but they manage to escape with the friend and everyone is okay. Meanwhile, with Nolan and Harper, they deal with a murder case that Randy got tied up in while trespassing. Randy's antics are so bad that even Monica Stevens tells him that he has to stay out of it. But in the end, he doesn't. And it gets much worse. That is until Randy ends up solving the case by accident and they arrest the guy. This episode is pretty intense compared to real life, but in the same season as Under Siege, Double Down, The Choice, and The Caller, it's a bit of a nothing burger. The next one was also very easy, as Season 6 had the writer's strike, making the episodes way crazier than before. But for this season, I say Season 6, Episode 7, Crushed, is the most normal of the season. This episode starts off with Tim having to take a ride along with Blair London. Meanwhile, Harper and Lopez are trying to find a nanny while they're at work. Then the main plot starts, where Emma and Olivia, who are 2 teenagers who would babysit for a family named the Olsons, went missing, and they aren't answering their phones. Over the next few hours, the LAPD find out about Olivia and Matthew's affair that went wrong. And at first, Olivia said that Matthew murdered Emma in order to keep things under wraps, and so Olivia and him could run away together. Turns out, though, that this was a lie, as Olivia was the one to murder Matthew and Emma. She admitted that she thought Matthew loved her, when in reality, she was just being used. So she decided to kill him, and when Emma refused to help her out with it afterwards, Olivia killed her too. The case is shut, and the episode ends. This is a wild case, and in any other season, this episode would not have made the list. But in a season with Escape Plan, Trouble in Paradise, and Punch Card, it was a no-brainer. Now on to the most recent season, Season 7. It took me a while to really think about which one was the most normal, as all of them are insane. But I would say that Season 7, Episode 7, The Mickey, is probably the winner. Pretty much the entire episode centers around Selena's last day of her training and the Mickey and Hammer plotline, as well as the first sting operation of Seth Ridley. On Selena's last day of being a rookie, Nolan forces her to take on Mickey and the Hammer, 2 brutes that work in arms trafficking. Those 2 end up taking down Nolan and Selena and steal their shop. But a while later, with the help of Lopez and Harper, they take the 2 down and make a deal with them. However, Mickey tries to escape with Tin at gunpoint, but the Hammer wants to have his deal and stops it from happening. Meanwhile with Seth, he ends up trying to escalate the case up the ladder to get a bigger bust. But this puts him in danger when he's taken away later that night. He then has to be saved by the LAPD, but technically he did make the bust. Overall, this episode is nothing compared to the likes of The Shot with the nuke, April Fools with the Purge, and who could forget the season finale. But if we look back at all 7 of these normal episodes, which one is the most normal? I think that STR and Crushed are definitely off the table. I also think that Injustice is more intense compared to the rest of these. So now we're left with seasons 1, 2, 4, and 7. Personally, out of these 4 episodes, the most normal episode of The Rookie is Season 1, Episode 2, Crash Course. There are no murders, no crazy gang situations, no nukes, just a bunch of different arrests that probably happen in Los Angeles in real life more often than anyone would think. It also makes sense that given this episode was so early on in the show, it wouldn't have taken as many risks as they do nowadays, as well as they probably didn't have the budget that they do in the more recent seasons. And with that, Crash Course is the most normal episode of The Rookie. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.